Let's be honest for a moment, shall we? Parents, teenagers are hard. They are messy, they're complicated, and they are brutal on your self-esteem. At Children's Harbor, we are raising 29 teenagers that are up against impossible odds, but we have access to incredible resources, expert advice to help us navigate through the chaos of parenting teenagers, but not everybody has that available to them.
Welcome to This Is Now, Parenting Teens Today, where we're stopped scrolling and we're starting everything about what's happening behind the scenes at the home. No filters, no fluff.
Just honest conversations about all of the parenting things that you were never warned about. I'm Tiffani Dhooge.
And I'm Erik Chafin.
And today we have Dr. Andre Caruso from iVolve and Dr. Brandi Pidermann from Changing Tides Therapy to help us break this down. What are we talking about today, Chafin?
Well, we're going to deep dive in the teenager's brain, getting really honest about something. I don't know, were we bad?
Yes.
Were we bad when we were
teenagers?
teenagers?
Thank God there was no Instagram reel when we were teenagers.
This is being recorded because I don't know if my teens really need to hear any of this stuff.
Suck it up, Buttercup. We're going to have honest conversations. We just told them that. To prove this hypothesis of ours, what have we done, Chafin?
It's something that parents never found out about. We're
Yeah.
going to deep dive into that and see a few people in the community that actually can.
We have reached out to the people who have shaped this community, and we have asked them one question. What is the worst thing that you did that your parents never found out about? So buckle up, because these people are shaping our community, and as you'll see, their teenage years were questionable. Let's just say it's a good thing that they turned out okay.
Hey, let's roll the footage.
When I was in high school, you could find me at a 21 and up nightclub, not having quiet sleepovers with my friends.
Hi friends. So my confession is when I was 15 or 16 years old, didn't even have a license yet, I stole my father's truck and I ended up hitting a curb so it caused some damage on the side, and I blamed it on the postman, saying the postman was driving by and hit his car while I was parked on the street. I confess 10 years later though. Okay, bye.
When I was a senior in high school, I would skip school on a Friday afternoon, go to the dog track and smoke cigarettes and gamble, and my parents didn't know. So that's my confession.
One time, I asked my mom to drop me off at the mall to hang out with my friends, but I really went and met up with a boy and went back to his house. Don't tell her.
So back in the 1980s, the drinking age in Michigan was 21, but in Wisconsin it was still 18. So on Friday nights, we would take the 50-mile trek to Hurley, Wisconsin, sometimes through crazy snowstorms, to fill up our trunks with Boone's Farm and beer for weeks to come by hiding it in snowbanks every single week. The things we did.
I did gamble back then. There were no apps for gambling, so I had a friend whose uncle was a bookie, and we used to gamble on NFL games. 5-game parlays never paid out.
So the craziest thing I've ever done that I never got caught as a child was that I used to tape the sensors of the alarm and escaped on the second story of my house. The end.
So clearly this is a universal truth. Teenagers mess up a lot, like it's actually in their job description. So what's your first question, Chafe?
My first question.
What do you got?
What's actually going on in a teenager's brain when they push back? Is it just hormones, or is it more to it?
I think it's a combination of sorts, right? So in the mental health profession, and one of the easier ways to describe it is, imagine your teenager's got this fancy new car, and the gas pedal is the limbic system that's in charge of like the emotion and the reward seeking, and the brake is the frontal lobe where they're in charge of the decision making. And the parent isn't the mechanic to fix it, but is more so the driving instructor trying to help guide them. Well, your teenager's got the pedal to the metal, right? Like they're taking off full throttle, and that's a normal part of the process at this age. So in trying to get them to make better decisions, it's through a process of guidance, but also letting them learn, letting them do risk-taking and engage in these experiences that allow them to gain more confidence. And yes, it will come off as rebellion, but something that I often refer to in my own sessions and just in general when I'm talking to, parents, children, youth, whoever, is rebellion is learning in disguise, right? So like if you do that simple reframe, you can understand that as much as it feels so frustrating that they're not listening and they're pushing back and doing all these terrible, horrible things, in my opinion, you come back to, but this is a learning opportunity, right? Like they're trying to assert some control. They're trying to take risk and figure out, like, who am I in this world? What am I capable of?
Rebellion
That's a
is
part of it.
learning in disguise. I don't think I've ever heard you say that.
But it's a powerful reframe
Yeah.
if you think about it.
Learning in disguise. Dr. Dre, why do some teens rebel more than others? Like, is it a personality thing, or is it because of the parenting choices that we make? What plays into kids that?
Yes.
Oh, wait. What's the quote? Two things can be.
Why was I surprised?
Right? More than one thing can be true at the same time. We're going to teach you that. You're going to have it by memory at some
Well,
point.
I'm going to tattoo it on my forehead. More than one thing can be true at the same time. It's very long for my forehead, though. All right, go ahead.
You can do it. We'll just start on Eric's forehead and we'll end on yours.
There you go.
As long as you guys
have it combined, yeah.
I think that idea is, yes, that is true, right? Some things are learned behaviors and some things are ingrained. As we know, we're all different. We're all unique individuals. None of us are created exactly equal. And then you take those differences and you add in learned experiences or parenting styles, and that could really develop how we're doing. So, yeah, some of it is just, nurture, and some of it is nature. I'm sure you've heard that before, nature and nurture. And that's where we have the responsibility as parents to make sure that we don't screw up the nurture part too much and give them an opportunity to figure out some of those things. And to piggyback off what Dr. Brandi was saying is the frontal lobe is still developing until mid-20s. So they're still trying to figure these things out. They don't have the ability to extrapolate data as well as some of us in this room do. I won't pick out who's who.
I feel judged.
Interesting that she self-identified.
Mental note: having two therapists on the show.
Good for your mental health.
Okay, there you go.
At least our mental health. But they can't extrapolate data the same way as we can. So when we say don't touch the hot stove, some will be like, oh, yeah, I shouldn't touch the hot stove. And others are like, what hot stove? Oh, that's why I don't touch it, right? They have to figure some of those things out. And when they want their own autonomy, which, try to be adults, they want to get in the Ferrari and speed along to that. And they don't have some of the skills yet fully developed to be able to do that. But we want to let them be able to do some stuff to figure out, because that's how they learn best. But it can't be everything, because some of that stuff is dangerous.
Right. Autonomy reduces rebellion. The more you're able to let your kid be autonomous in healthy, safe ways, it will reduce it could reduce all of the crazy rebellion. To the point, so think about if you're a stricter parent, you are probably going to yield a sneakier, rebellious teen, right? Because you're kind of controlling them. You're a bit overbearing. It's my way or the highway. If you're more passive, then you're going to have a kid that doesn't really, is kind of stuck in that in between, like not sure if I want to make this decision, where do I go, constantly questioning. But if you can fall in the middle and have some sort of a balance where you're authoritative and firm, but you collaborate and you give them some of that autonomy, it will reduce the rebellion in the long run.
Clear expectations. Right?
Help me explain. Right. Yeah, help me explain to someone when you just said the word autonomy, because that doesn't resonate with everyone. Like to the normal parent who doesn't have a clinical background or doesn't have access to clinical resources. What does that mean? Like your child wants autonomy. What does that actually mean? When you're communicating to people with what is autonomy? What does that mean?
They want to be able to make decisions for themselves. They want to have a say in things. They want to have respect and their opinion to be valued and heard.
They want to feel grown.
They want to feel valued and heard.
Okay. That they have a little bit of authority of their own.
Right.
Ownership.
That
They
there's
want some
ownership of
control
their own life.
Right.
So it's so much different, and I would imagine most of the listeners can relate in the business arena, where encouraging your employees to have some freedom and ability to make some decisions goes a long way in their satisfaction. Right? Obviously, as the boss, they can't have all the decisions because they don't have all the information in the inner workings. But you give them some autonomy, some ownership of some of the decisions they can make, and then they feel more important in the company. They feel like they belong. They feel like they're part of it. So they are going to be happier and more engaging.
100%.
That's a
Much
great
like the
analogy.
children.
100%.
Same way. If they feel like they have some control and ownership, then they get to make some decisions.
So then what I heard as a reframe you just say was that if you are a hardcore authoritative parent, my way or the highway, then you're going to produce all of your decisions will pour out of you. Like you're controlling every single decision. Your child's most likely, because of their desperate need for control, to just go behind your back. It's not that they're behaving or they're doing or they're making the right choices or the choices you want them to make. They're just doing it. They're doing it on the down low, under the table, and they don't feel safe enough to come to you. However, if you swing the completely opposite direction and you're passive and you're like, oh, just do you, boo. They don't have the structure that they need to feel safe, and you're producing a child who doesn't feel secure enough to navigate. So it's polar opposites. You don't want to be one and you don't want to be the opposite either. You need to be that healthy middle ground. Did I reframe that right?
I mean, extremes in anything are not great.
Right.
We are on a giant spectrum. Everything is in a pretty much great area. Right? Like there's very few things that are absolutes. So there's no different here. We don't want to go to an extreme. I can give a good example of what happens if we become too strong of the parent that says you can't do anything, don't let them go out, don't let them hang out with their friends. You can't stunt growth. It's going to find its way to grow, right? So when those kids have access, they're going to find a way. But generally what happens is the group of people, their friends, their peers, the good ones, the ones that you probably want good influence from, are not going to also push that boundary because they don't want to get in trouble with the other parent either. But the rebellious ones, the ones that are to the other extreme, don't care. So then they're going to be the ones the child gravitates to. So now they're going to not only rebel about the being held back and being sheltered, they're going to rebel to the extreme because that's going to be their influence now.
Interesting.
And then when they get out, then it's even harder to reel back.
Interesting. So let's talk about punishment versus natural consequence. What's the real difference between the two, and why do we tend to think that natural consequences work better?
So punishment is you're grounded, right? So you got a bad grade on a test. Natural consequence is if they stayed up all night doom scrolling, didn't study, was tired, went to school, bombed the test, they're not going to do well. And it's going to be harder for them to pick up that grade moving forward, right? If you got a great grade and then you bomb a test, it's going to set you back. Maybe you were working towards a goal. Letting them figure that out on their own, though, instead of you're grounded and enforcing that punishment, it's not going to get you what you want. Let them learn and make the connection, or help them make the connection in real time in life, and that will yield the results that you're looking for. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Like it just...
And there's ways to add some controls into there, right? I think that's the thing is go back to the stove. We can't always just let the natural consequences take effect because sometimes they're dangerous. Or if they fail too many tests and that becomes a challenge for them that's bigger than what they're expecting from that, right? So we put some controls in place, but what the keys are consistency and communication, right? There should be some expectation of what happens if you do something. So the punishments, if there's going to be any, they should be consistent. The natural consequences that you're going to allow should be consistent so that they have an expectation of what it's going to be. What happens a lot of times as parents, we freak out, so we become reactionary. And then we react to the situation instead of respond, so we train them that reaction is good. So now they react to anything that you tell them. However, if you have some consistencies, hey, if you don't do this well on the test, this is the consequence. This is what happens. And it sticks to that. No matter if it goes up and down, you stick. If you stay out late, you have the ability to call us. You will be fine that night, but there could be a consequence depending on what it is. But however, that consequence will be worse if you don't call us.
If you don't call.
Like, so you set those kind of expectations around these things and you stay consistent with them so they know what to expect so that they feel comfortable making those decisions for them if it's like worth the consequence.
I'm thinking of I don't know about you, but I've got a running list right now in my head of all the things I did wrong, all the things, like all of the scenarios that we went through with Jordan, and I'm like, I did this wrong, I did that wrong, I did that while they're speaking. I don't.
Oh yeah, it's a
You
ton,
still have two littles.
It's a ton of different things I'm thinking about, but it's like you already know yourself, and you're learning about yourself as you're going, as well as a parent, as you're going through this, and then you're growing as they're growing, and you're figuring things out, and you're finding things that your kid is very similar to who you are, and you're basically almost going through this process of like figuring out together. Like my youngest one, Hannah, she's very, very similar to me, and come to find out we're almost identical in terms of how we process and how we do certain things. So at first, her and I mean, just combustion, and then I figured, oh my gosh, actually that's me in a smaller form. That's interesting.
That's me as a
and
girl.
I think I maybe talked to Dre about it. Like, this is interesting, but it helps you then process. Like, well, you know what? Let's get this together. And I wish I had the resources the kids have now today. I wish I had that back then, because it would help me as a kid. So
I think the reframe for me, just personally, I can't speak for everyone, is I was so focused on preventing. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I did not know what I was doing. And, I don't have 3, I have 1. And I was so focused on preventing a mistake. Like, I didn't want him to make a mistake, or trying to control the situation so that he wouldn't fail. He wouldn't have to regret.
What would it mean if you failed?
Well, I didn't want him. I wasn't thinking about this in real time. But I didn't want him to have to go through the regret and the shame and all of the setbacks that come along with making these dumb mistakes that you can make. They're old enough to make mistakes that derail their future, but they're still brain damaged, because they really are. They're like brain damaged. Teenagers are brain damaged. And so I was so focused on preventing the mistake, and there was no real focus on helping him learn from his mistakes. So that reframe, I think, is really vital, that shift in your mindset as a parent. Oh, it's not my job to keep him from making mistakes. It's my job to help him learn from the mistakes that he makes.
I like to think I like to say it's in construction, right? Like, their brains are in construction. And
brain damage isn't good?
Preferably in construction versus brain damage. But in going and speaking to what you're saying, it's as much as you'd like to wrap them in a bubble and secure their safety and well-being forever and make sure that they're never making a bad decision, what are you really teaching them? You're teaching them to overly rely on you. You're teaching them that the world is not safe. You're teaching them that their decisions are not safe. And that is not helping. That's not helping when they're developing that frontal cortex and they're trying to decide, decision making. What do I do? Can I trust myself? Well, no, mom or dad don't know what to do, or my caregiver will take care of it. But there comes a point in time where they have to take care of it. They're not going to be able to look back behind them and say, what do I do? So while that's well-meaning, and most parents do it, it's not the preferred method, because it's not going to yield the results that you're really looking for.
it almost is. I always think about being a navigating and mentoring instead of. And it's hard. It is tremendously hard. Just to kind
parenting is hard.
Edge them through wherever they're going.
I think something else Tiffani said is very important, not only for the youth to understand, but also for adults to understand, probably even more so when they're dealing with the youth, is this expectation that they're going to ruin their future. They're 15, 20, like ideally at this rate, probably leading to 100. They can screw everything up for the next 20 years.
Yes.
And still have
That's the irony.
3 times more life ahead of
time.
them. Right? And I think we teach this. You have to understand what you're going to be for the rest of your career once you graduate high school. You have to go to college and decide all these things. We don't really give room for that exploration. We don't give room to realize you can fail a lot. And you should. So as parents, we don't want them to do what we did. We don't want to have them to, but we turned out okay by making those mistakes. Like, some of it added to our character.
Just a little bit of a twitch.
Well, if you can embrace failure, and find it, almost like, I don't know, fun. I don't know if you want to call it fun, depending on how painful it is. But just falling down and then, failing fast.
Failure's not a bad word either. I think that's the thing. If we actually go to a science look at it, when you talk about hypothesis, to get the thing that you're trying to do, you have
gotta
to fail
fail a
to
lot.
reject it. But the word failure in there is actually success.
It all depends, Dre, if you had a critical parent or not.
Oh, that is so
Not to
true.
be clinical. I'm
That
sorry.
is so true.
So
What is the trick to setting rules that don't immediately ignite a power struggle in your home? So for parents right now who are struggling with a kid who's pushing back, with normal part of development, as we've just established, what's the trick to establishing those rules and those boundaries without immediately dealing with the power struggle? When things start to heat up, how or what is the best way to de-escalate those situations? So I know that's two questions, but
So the first part is, again, it's something important to keep in mind, is we're all different. As a parent, hopefully you know your child better than anyone. So use the information you know. So one size is not going to fit all around this for this
Right.
answer. But it goes back to something I said earlier, super important, is communication. And they want some autonomy. So if you're coming up with rules, if you're coming up with strategies that you want to put in place, understand where your kid is developmentally, understand what autonomy they can and can't have, and then take their advice. Ask them some of the questions. What do you think's a good bedtime? What do you think's a good curfew?
That's
2
Have that
a.m.
conversation.
No,
Okay,
so
but then you have
you
a negotiation,
collaborate.
just like you would in any kind of
Collaborate.
business, right?
That's
Like,
my one word answer to that is exactly what Dr. Dre is saying, is it comes down to collaborate. I want my curfew to be 2 a.m. I wanted your curfew to be 9. Where do we meet in the middle? Let's talk that through of why maybe 2 a.m. is a little unreasonable at 15 and why 9 might be unreasonable, but let's try to collaborate and meet in the middle. But that's exactly what that is. It's getting to know what autonomy your kid can have and, who they are. You know your kid better than anyone.
and level setting, right? I think having that conversation up front and say, hey, if I'm going to give you an opportunity to have input, but you have to be realistic, right? So you know how I think, I know how you think. Let's find a way before we even start the conversation to make sure that we're not going to come up with something outlandish like 2 o'clock, right? We're going to come up with something that's reasonable. And you'll find most times they'll underscore the thing that you were going to allow because they're trying to compensate because they don't want to overstep because they love the autonomy. They want that opportunity to keep doing it. So they're going to, especially in the beginning, be very guarded on what they do. And then you have a chance to set that good expectation and they feel very in control.
That's definitely a question that we get a lot of, how do I implement a new rule or have a conversation with my child without engaging in a power struggle? So we created a free download that goes along with this episode. Just go down to your episode notes and click the download. I believe we are calling it Rebellion Survival Guide to help you with those some common power struggles that happen in your home. Just go down to the episode notes and click the link.
Very similar language to a zombie apocalypse.
Oh, come on.
always apocalyptic.
I guess
This
that
guy
really
just-
that really should have resonated with you because you've got 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 children.
Yeah.
And you probably have to speak to them. You probably communicate differently to each of them.
100%, and every single, you and I talk about this all the time, Tiffani. Everybody has a different way they communicate, their styles. My oldest being very pragmatic and very process driven. My middle one being the mayor, and then my shaking hands, kissing babies, and then my youngest being the CEO, and she's driven, and
She is a
I have
CEO.
to, empower her to think. You need to have a little bit of empathy to go through this, and
Empathy?
yeah, empathy, yeah. It's kind of like you have to be a little polished, but I wouldn't take them any differently in terms of who they are because I've always find it fascinating to get a little deeper and seeing where they're at and then helping them guide them. And, it's not, I've grown tremendously because my personality is much different than a couple of them, especially my son, because, it's him and I'm talking to everybody. He's wondering, why are you talking? Why is that any value? When 9 years old, I still remember this going through Publix multiple times. At 9 years old, he asked me, he's like, Dad, why did you talk to that person? At 9, he's just like, there's no value.
There's no value in this.
But now he actually sees it, and now I get calls at 20 years old when he's talking to me at work. Is hey, I just connected with this girl at work, and she's doing social media as a side hustle. Do you know anybody that she could help in X, Y, and Z? I'm like, dude, this guy's connected.
I like to talk to Ian just
he's
because
an introvert. He's a natural introvert.
he's got some of
Connecting dots.
you are still running through his veins, even though he's an introvert. I like to talk to Ian just to jack with him, because I know he doesn't like to talk to people. Like, it's not his thing. So I'll
better.
just keep the engagement going, just to like torture him.
We
Now he knows my secret.
We got him into the restaurant business, so now he has been forced to talk to people and serve people, and so that is actually
that's
helped
helping.
him,
All right. After a big argument, how can parents repair the relationship and reset? What's the best approach after everybody's gotten out of control and gone to their corner? How do we do this?
This is my favorite one.
It's not.
Oh, it was?
It's not scotch either.
It's not Scotch.
You can't give your children
good.
no.
Wait, let's
You
say
ready?
scotch.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, thanks.
I'll lay it on you. Apologize.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that. I really wasn't.
Apologize.
I was not expecting that.
See, he even said no.
was
Is that a
waiting.
conflict or sarcasm, Dre?
Ownership?
I was waiting. I was.
Make sure you drink the scotch first.
I did. I honestly was not expecting
hierarchy,
that.
No, I'm your boss.
Apologize. Learn to apologize and take accountability for your part.
What if you didn't do anything wrong? What if they were just a jerk?
Apologize for raising a jerk.
Wow, that's double ownership.
I'm serious.
That's pretty.
So it's interesting you say that, though, because did you stop to ask how they felt?
No.
Because you're just labeling them as a jerk. So I'll give you an example. I was doing a virtual session with a mother and a daughter, and the mother was in her office, the daughter was in her room, same household, but different rooms. We were working on some family stuff. The mother said something to the daughter and had repeated it quite a few times, and it had really, really hurt her daughter. It was very offensive. Mom just didn't understand, like, why is she so sensitive? Like, why would that have been such a big deal for her? So I sat there and flipped it, and I used an example for mom, but coming from her partner, so her husband. I said, if dad said something like this, how would that make you feel? And mom, reacted and was like, well, first of all, that's rude, and he should apologize. Who says that? And so I sat there and used the power of silence in therapy and did a, and you just see the connection be made over her face. And it was amazing. And then she got up and walked out. She left. And so the child's looking at me on the screen and looking at the other square, going back and forth, like, what just happened? Not even like 10 seconds later, you hear a soft knock, and she comes in. I see her now on the daughter's screen, and she walks in, and she goes, that was pretty insensitive, and I'm sorry that I said that.
Oh my god.
And the daughter just loses it.
Whoa.
Breakthrough.
And just a complete puddle, and the mother embraces her. And for 60 seconds, they're holding each other and crying, and just the mom apologized, and you have no idea how powerful that two words, I'm sorry, was.
Wow.
It was amazing. It was so incredible to watch. She apologized. She took accountability.
Did you cry?
Oh, 100%. Well, me or the mom? Mom and daughter were, after I, maybe move the screen a little bit, right? Move the screen a little. No, but I was so proud of them for learning that. And from that moment on, like, things substantially improved because mom was able to sit there and say, you know what? It isn't always you. It's me too. Maybe I'm being too critical, or, I had too high of an expectation and I said something because I was having a bad day and I took out, my work stress out on you, or I just wasn't thinking about what that felt like for you. An apology goes a long way.
Wow. That was good. I honestly wasn't expecting that. That was great. Are you okay?
Just touch on something that Erik mentioned also, because I think it kind of relates. You got to be cautious with labels as well, right? I'm not a fan of labels in general. But you mentioned introvert, extrovert. There's really no such thing. It's really how you feel at that moment, depending on a lot of situations. Did you sleep well? Are the people in the room you like? Are you hydrated? Like, there's so many things that go into how you feel if you want to interact with people or not interact with people. But what challenges, especially with the youth, when we start putting labels on like that, they start to believe it. And then they make excuses around that label. So I can't go to that event because I'm an introvert, right? And it's something sometimes as innocent as that, but especially when they're forming their identity, starting to hear things like that, they start to believe these things. So I just cautious with labeling people around a particular personality trait, especially when they're so malleable to those traits. Like, I'm sometimes an introvert. Sometimes I don't like people a lot, right? I work with people all the time.
Yes.
So it really depends on the people in the room, who's here, how well I'm rested, how my social battery is. A lot of these things kind of go into effect on how I feel and if I want to be in that room.
Yes.
But if I start putting that label to myself, then I'll commit or not commit to certain things based on that kind of belief system.
Interesting.
So I think that just kind
That's
of goes
great.
what we're talking about, just to be cautious. Right?
That's really
There's
great.
power in
stop
your
using
words.
stop using introverts. Basically, you're saying just stop that.
Well, I
Altogether.
totally agree with Dr. Dre because, I mean, something as simple as, you think about the body shaming, right? Like if a mother is in front of a mirror, and we've seen these examples, right? And she's like, oh, God, I'm so fat, right? I this and that.
Yep.
And then the daughter's constantly being
Yes.
told, you look just like your mother.
Yes.
Well, what do you think the messaging is? I look just like mom. Mom says she's fat. So am I fat? Like it's not, your words carry a lot of weight. And it goes for the same thing when you guys are watching characters on TV, and maybe there's a character, especially when they're younger too, that they closely identify with, and it's you're criticizing them and you're saying all these things, and it's just they're internalizing that, like, oh well, that's me.
They play
so
those
am
tapes
I
on their
also, yeah, am I also that? So
It's all programming.
You're just like your
Yeah.
father. It happens a lot with co-parenting, like when you're in blended families or in
I've never heard
divorced
that.
families.
I've never heard that before.
You've never heard your just oh hush. I was like, what? When you've been divorced and you're raising someone else's child, or you're just like your father, and what that does to their self-speak. Same thing with body positivity. If you hear your mother constantly berating herself, looking in the mirror and going, oh, I hate my nose, or I hate my butt, or I really need to take care of this problem area, that becomes her self-speak.
it's her internal
It
dialogue.
becomes her. She's going to speak about herself the same way that she watched you speak about yourself her entire life. It just becomes part of their I don't want to say identity, but the way that they talk to themselves.
It's really entertaining, Tiffany, is when you actually get that comment, like you're just like your father, and the child says, "Well, thank you."
Right.
Did that happen?
I've
Is that a
happened
real thing?
Several times, and then it basically is like everybody looks around each other, and then okay, we'll move on with life.
Okay.
I'm like yes,
Well, think about that, though,
let's go.
because
Anyway,
your relationship with the father might be,
Negative.
right, but the other person, the child, might actually have a good relationship.
Yes.
So you're creating conflict in their mind. of,
Yes.
yeah, don't ask my
Wow.
son,
Yeah, it
right?
should be.
Don't ask my
Yes.
son.
I love my
He'd be
dad.
like, of
But at
course
the
I'm
same
not.
time, now you question. Now you're doing is saying you're questioning, hey, their opinion, but also now they're questioning your opinion.
Yes.
because they have a good outlook on this.
Yes.
So that it is cautious how you.
Well, if my wife was talking about my golf game, then my son would be like, yes, but if not, no.
It's definitely targeted.
Sorry.
So if we have a parent out there who's stuck in a cycle of constant pushback in their home, what is one thing that they can try today to strengthen that situation? We're gonna-
Connect with your kid. Find a commonality, connect with your kid, and take interest in their things too. No, maybe you don't like anime and you want nothing to do with it, but it's so popular and your kid is so obsessed with it. Maybe try to just lean in to interest of theirs. Let them read a comic book to you, watch an episode of a show, and then take them on a date to something that you really enjoy. Let them into your world. Connect. Have a weekly family game night. Have a daddy-daughter date, a mother and son, outing, whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be costly. It could be we're watching our favorite TV show, or we, cook a certain recipe that's just like our favorite. It could be I'm making lunch and then going to a local park to just sit and eat. It could be a number of things.
Going on a walk.
I'm going on a walk, whatever it is. To help with that, my biggest thing is you need to connect with your kids. Connect. Find a way to connect.
And have some expectation. You're going to get pushback. Like that's their job, right?
It's
Like
normal.
the kids have to push back, to challenge, to see what they can get away with, to see what they can, see where they're at. But if you have the expectation that you're expecting pushback, you're not going to react to it. You're going to respond to it. You're going to find out why you're getting pushback. You're going to have the ability to connect because now you're not reacting yourself to the pushback, and now you're going in a tug of war that's not going to win. Anytime I have a conversation, I expect, okay, same thing again at work. If you expect some pushback, you're going to get it. But if you walk in and the take down that chance for it to happen before it happens, especially in your own mind, conflict is gone. Now it just becomes funny. Yep, there we go. I expected that. It happened. Now let's have the conversation.
I have a question for you, Dre. So my girl's obviously 14, 16, and there's a gap in there where for whatever reason they stopped giving hugs. I don't know what. And then, of course, my 16-year-old had advised me. So, I went through that, Dad. And when she turns 14, for whatever reason, it kind of turns back on. So I find it interesting because, like, right now, Hannah's 13, but I go to give her a hug. She's like, I don't know, it ain't happening. So it's an interesting dynamic. But my 16-year-old tells me that, it all starts to morph and come back. I don't know if that's a thing. I don't know if maybe it's just me. I know you probably have some comedy for me right now, but...
No.
I think
This is serious.
It's a more than one thing can be true kind of question,
Yeah.
right? So it could be just the personality that they're going through a change. They feel uncomfortable. They could be experiencing something. Sometimes we just don't want to touch for a little while. We feel like it's a tactical thing. So I don't know them well to even kind of guess on what the reasoning is, but that could be a good question for, again, why not communicate that? Hey, I noticed that you used to always want to give hugs. Now you don't. Is everything okay? I'm cool with it either way. I'm just want to check in with you.
Yeah. And I've done that, and I've asked her, and it's become a joke. She's like, no, I just don't want to. Okay.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right.
Right. Not
She's
guilt.
sharing with
Yeah, not shaming.
Not
just-
shaming, not guilt tripping,
And then I
but
make-
adding that it's okay if it
And
is.
of course,
Just
I make a
wanted
joke.
to check in.
I have to smell myself. I'm like, am I okay? Am I...
So if there's one thing we're walking away with today is that our teenager pushing back is not a bug in their system. It's literally how they're wired. They are going to take risks. They are going to make bad decisions. And as parents, our job is not to control or try to manage or prevent every mistake. It's to help them learn from their choices and from their failures or their mistakes. Thanks for joining us today on This Is Now Parenting Teens Today. If you love this episode, please share it with a fellow stressed out parent and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for joining us, everybody.